I never thought the day would come when I'd be sitting across from my best friend Jake, handing him an assignment, and not just any assignment, but one with a deadline, clear expectations, and an overdue warning that felt like it was coming straight from a courtroom judge. It was the kind of moment I always imagined would happen in some sitcom, where two pals awkwardly try to keep things cool while navigating the sudden switch of power dynamics. But nope, this was real life, and the air between us was heavy with unspoken tension. It all started with this meeting. One of those routine Monday huddles that I, at the time, thought wouldn't change much in our already busy work lives. Jake and I had sat side by side in that conference room for years, casually tossing ideas back and forth, laughing at each other's lame jokes, and occasionally slacking off a bit. But that particular morning, the atmosphere was different, more formal. Less buddy-buddy, more chains of command, and honestly, kind of terrifying. Walking out of that meeting with the weight of my new role pressing down like an extra heavy backpack, I glanced over at Jake. I could see the flicker of surprise and some mixture of confusion or maybe even disappointment in his eyes. I don't think either of us fully knew what was coming next, but from that moment on, everything between us felt shifted, like we'd stepped through some invisible door without realizing it until it slammed shut behind us. Have you ever accidentally become the boss in a friendship? Yeah, me neither until it actually happened. One day, we're just two friends grabbing coffee after work, shooting the breeze about whatever random TV show we were hooked on, and the next, you're the one sending emails that end with, "Please confirm by EOD to your best buddy." And trust me, that's a whole different kind of awkward. Jake and I go way back. Like, since college, back when ramen noodles were our primary food group and procrastination was an Olympic sport we both competed in. We were those friends who could finish each other's sentences, swap ridiculous nicknames, and still somehow make the weirdest inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else. When we both landed jobs at the same company after graduation, I honestly thought it was a win-win. I mean, how often do you get to work with your best friend? Coffee breaks would be more fun, lunches more lively, and maybe, just maybe, I'd have a built-in excuse to slack a little during the day. Turns out that joke was on me. Right from the start, things were fairly equal. We'd brainstorm over shared desks, laugh at the same ridiculous emails from Mr. Daniels, and sometimes even team up on projects. Jake was the guy who could crack a clever pitch, bring energy, and, well, keep things entertaining. I like to think I balanced him out with being a bit more organized. Though honestly, organized is a relative term in our universe. But then, that promotion came faster than I expected. It was one of those moments when you think, cool, I'm moving up, until you suddenly realize that up means you're now overseeing people you used to hang out with during lunch breaks, including Jake. It wasn't like I suddenly wanted to be the big boss or anything. It just kind of happened. One day, I was peer-to-peer with Jake, tossing ideas around. The next, I was reviewing his work, deciding deadlines, and yes, dealing with those awkward moments where I had to tell him, we really need this by Friday. Honestly, I wasn't sure how to feel about it. On one hand, I was proud, felt like my hard work was paying off. But on the other, I was pretty sure I'd turned our friendship into some kind of weird office power play, and that was unsettling. Jake? Well, he didn't say much at first, but I could tell something was off. Here's the thing. We've always been equals, partners in crime, as I said. So suddenly stepping into a role where I had to, well, manage him was like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It wasn't just about work anymore, it was about unspoken boundaries and shifting roles we weren't prepared for. Did this change how we saw each other? Would he respect me more? Less? Or would the jealousy or weirdness silently creep in? I started to notice little things. Jake, who used to respond to my jokes with a quick, teasing comeback, now sometimes just gave a nod or a tight-lipped smile. His once casual emails became more formal or, sometimes, sprinkled with just enough sarcasm to make me wonder if he was really that annoyed or just messing around. Like that time, he sent me back a report with a header that read, "Completed under duress," with an exclamation mark and nothing else. I laughed, sure, but inside I was trying to figure out if he was sending me a subtle message. Sarah, our quirky coworker, was the one person caught in the middle without really choosing sides. She's the kind of person who loves to mediate peace talks and make jokes to lighten the mood, but even she admitted it was harder than she thought. One day, over coffee, she whispered, "Maybe you should cut him a little slack. He's juggling the new boss-best friend situation and probably feeling like his status just took a nosedive." I wanted to believe we could just keep things normal. But Mr. Daniels didn't make that easy. The guy runs a tight ship with zero patience for missed deadlines or half-hearted efforts. When I inherited this new role, the pressure to enforce schedules and meet expectations landed squarely on my shoulders. That meant no more letting things slide just because Jake was my friend. And again, that felt terrible. One afternoon, after forcing another urgent deadline on Jake's team, I caught him staring at his computer screen with this annoyed expression. When I approached to check in, he didn't sugarcoat it. It feels weird, he said, not looking up. Like suddenly I'm the guy who has to ask you permission to breathe around here. There was some hurt in his voice, and that hit harder than I expected. I realized then that this whole manager best friend dance was about more than missing deadlines or sarcastic emails. It was about respect, identity, and the unspoken shift in our dynamic that neither of us really signed up for. And, well, it was going to take a lot more than just please confirm by EOD emails to fix it. But that conversation? It was just the beginning. The first day wearing the boss hat while Jake was sitting on the other side of the desk felt like stepping onto a stage without rehearsals. I kept running through all the scenarios in my head. What if I sounded too harsh, too soft? Did I need to adjust the way I phrased instructions so it didn't come off like I was suddenly a dictator? It was a stew of awkwardness and second-guessing that I wish I could have shaken off with a couple of deep breaths. Instead, I just ended up sounding, well, kind of robotic, like I'd suddenly been put on a PowerPoint presentation and lost my ability to speak normally. Jake's reaction was equally tangled. He smiled, sort of. More like a half smirk, with eyes that said, are we seriously doing this now? There was this moment where I thought, okay, just keep it business, keep it professional, but then I caught the slight raise of his eyebrow, that familiar spark of mischief flickering behind his reluctance. It was like he was silently protesting, but in a way only he could pull off without saying a word. At first, I tried to let little things slide. Jake missing a couple of minor deadlines? No biggie. His emails peppered with passive-aggressive wit? Mostly just a chuckle and a mental note. But when a bigger report came in late, like the kind that could have sent Mr. Daniels into a full-on tactical briefing, I realized this wasn't just harmless banter. The line between joking around and undermining authority was blurring fast. And then there was that one email he sent me, borderline insubordination territory, but worded with enough sarcasm to keep me guessing if he was serious or just testing the waters. It read, "Absolutely thrilled to squeeze in your Kurgensa requests between avoiding impending doom. Cheers." I stared at it for a moment, half amused, half frustrated, wondering if I should respond with a "please take a seat in my office," and then realized I was basically inviting drama from my best friend. That's where Sarah stepped in like our unofficial peacekeeper. She came around one afternoon, perked up her eyebrows over her signature oversized nerdy glasses and said, "You're both walking a tightrope here." I get it, roles changed and nobody told the friendship. But maybe Jake's just worried about losing what he had before this managerial makeover. Her voice was gentle but steady, like she was willing to referee this awkward office game without tipping the scales too far. Sarah's advice probably saved me more times than I want to admit. She'd remind me to check in with Jake not just as his manager but as his buddy, sliding a coffee mug over to him during break times with an understanding smile. And if things got tense, she'd throw in a little humor like suggesting Jake draft a petition demanding, "I stop turning into Mr. Daniels," which eased the mood just enough to keep the lines of communication open. Meanwhile, Mr. Daniels had his own expectations, relentless and crystal clear. He wasn't about to cut anyone slack, least of all Jake, and his gaze practically burned holes every time deadlines slipped or reports missed the mark. The responsibility to enforce these standards? That was now squarely on me, and trust me, it wasn't just a few emails or a quick reminder. It was daily pressure, a constant juggling act between being fair to Jake and not looking like I was playing favorites. Things hit a rougher patch when I had to enforce a particularly tight deadline that Mr. Daniels insisted on. No wiggle room, no excuses. I watched Jake's face as he realized compliance meant cranking out work that left little space for his usual creative spark or downtime. Later, catching a glimpse of him gripping his mouse and staring blankly at his screen, I hesitated before asking, "How's it going?" The sigh he let out wasn't just about work. It felt like an unspoken conversation about how the new boss-best friend arrangement was wearing on him. Then came that conversation, the one that opened a door I hadn't realized was locked. Jake looked me dead in the eye and said, "It feels weird, like suddenly I'm the guy who has to ask you permission to breathe around here." He wasn't complaining about the work itself or the assignments, it was deeper. A vulnerability wrapped in frustration, the feeling of being less than in a relationship that had always been about equals. That moment was a punch to the gut. It forced me to confront the fact that this wasn't just about titles or tasks, but about identity and respect. Things that can't be implanted in an org chart or negotiated with emails. Suddenly, the cracks in our friendship were exposed, and the questions we'd been tiptoeing around spilled into the open. It dawned on me that the real challenge wasn't managing Jake's projects or wrestling with Mr. Gress. Daniel's expectations, it was figuring out how to honor a friendship that was evolving in ways neither of us asked for but neither could ignore. And as much as I wanted to fix it with a quick, "Let's just be friends again," I knew it wasn't going to be that simple. This was only the beginning of rewriting the rules between us, one awkward, tension-filled step at a time. After that heart-to-heart, things didn't magically smooth over overnight, because if only friendship work dilemmas were so simple. But we both knew that pretending everything was fine when it wasn't would only make the discomfort linger like an awkward family dinner no one wanted to RSVP to again. I made a conscious effort to approach my role differently. Instead of just issuing deadlines and chasing deliverables, I started checking in more genuinely. No formalities, no managerial mask. I'd catch Jake at the coffee machine and ask, "How's the crazy workload treating you?" Or drop a casual, "Hey, let me know if I'm being a jerk, boss." Surprisingly, those little moments cracked the tension more than any official email ever could. Jake, on his part, began to loosen up too. The sarcastic emails faded, replaced by a more straightforward tone, not because he stopped being himself, but because he realized he could still be honest without being antagonistic. One day, we even managed a proper laugh over an inside joke about how Mr. Frank, Daniel's no-nonsense attitude, is secretly plotting world domination. That felt like the friendship I knew sneaking back beneath the surface of the boss-best friend chaos. Sarah was still our unofficial therapist/sidekick, reminding us both to keep communication open and reminding me not to overschedule Jake, or myself for that matter. "Balance, people," she'd say with a wink, serving as a gentle break from the stress of deadlines and office politics. But it wasn't just about lightening the mood. We each had to redefine respect and boundaries. I learned that being his boss didn't mean telling him what to do like some tyrant, but setting clear expectations while honoring his strengths and experience. Jake realized that respecting the role I had to play didn't mean he was losing his voice or status as my friend. It was awkward sometimes, I won't lie, but it became less of a minefield and more of a dance where we figured out when to lead and when to follow. 1D, and the truth? Our friendship got stronger in a weird, twisted way. It had endured messy emotions, power shifts, and silent frustrations. It wasn't perfect and probably never would be, but we'd built a new kind of trust, one where honesty was okay, even if it came with a side of sarcasm or tough feedback. At least now, when I send Jake an assignment and add the dreaded "please confirm by EOD, it feels a little less like I'm sending a ceasefire warning and more like we're just two grown-ups figuring this out. The balance between friend and boss isn't something I think either of us will ever master completely, maybe because the lines between those roles are supposed to blur a little. So yeah, would I recommend managing your best friend? Maybe with a map, a compass, and a really good sense of humor. But no matter what, this experience taught me that a friendship can survive, and sometimes even thrive through the weirdest transitions, as long as both people are willing to talk, laugh, and occasionally admit when they're feeling like the underdog. And hey, if you ever find yourself accidentally becoming the boss of your best friend, maybe just remember it's not about losing who you were, it's about discovering who you can be, together.